Hey everyone, this is Group 7, and our case study today focuses on exploring individual good, societal good, the differences between them, and the issues that may arise in conjoining them. As you're listening to this presentation, here's some things that you should keep in mind. Imagine that you are a teacher and that your students are struggling big time. Think about ways that you can help them. In this case study, we'll examine this from a teacher's perspective who wants to motivate students and give them ways to succeed that they are truly interested in. Think about the pros and cons of this system and what you might do if you were in Mr. Diaz, the teacher's, situation. Before we expand on our thoughts and address the issues outlined in this case study, let's take a look at our story.
Our case study started out at Nestor High. Nestor High suffered from a 60% dropout rate. There was also open drug trafficking, student violence, vandalism, and the lowest achievement scores in the state. The school decided to take action and brought in Emmanuel Diaz.
Mr. Diaz arrived as principal, and within just 5 years he was able to turn the place around. He started in the community by contacting the local merchants and the owners of the small businesses and factories. They all agreed with him that something had to be done for the neighborhood, and amazingly, Mr. Diaz convinced them that they were the key. He arranged enough work-study opportunities so that any student who wanted one could pick his or her occupational experiment. Work experiments also carried over into the classrooms, as teachers linked their teaching as much as possible to the work experiences students were having. Practical math and science, history of technology and labor, literature of workers, and all sorts of other applied aspects of the school subjects were being taught. Students infected with good experiences at work and school spread their enthusiasm to others, and it was like a communicable disease. Nestor High soon was among the best urban schools in the state as measured by reading scores, dropout rate, vandalism, crime, drug abuse, and subjective assessments of a more positive atmosphere.
There was one problem, however. The few students from Nestor who applied to highly selective colleges were being turned down. Admissions officers claimed that the courses at Nestor were not academic enough, and that the experience was too narrowly vocational to really prepare people for college. Mr. Diaz wondered if he had really done good for his school and its students, or if he had merely created a social salvage machine that could produce workers but not provide opportunity for true upward mobility and individual fulfillment. After reading our case study, we decided to examine some outside resources to see if we could compare those resources to this study. And actually, there's a pretty popular TV show out now called Shameless, and we found a pretty good connection between that TV show and this case study. And Emma's going to go ahead and talk about how she related her thoughts to that TV show.
I'm a huge Shameless fan, and when I first heard this case study, I immediately started to reference it back to that. Lip Gallagher was very smart for his age and his high school. He had over a 4.0 GPA and was able to get into colleges. Now, I know in our case study it said that they had troubles applying to prestige schools. However, Lip ended up going to a community college. Since Lip did so well in high school, he thought that college would be easy. The curriculum was nothing like he expected, and it wasn't just because it was the change from high school to college. It ended up that a lot of the content that he learned in high school wasn't applicable to what he was learning in college. Overall, I think this really applies to our case study because Mr. Diaz tried to make his curriculum more vocational instead of sticking to the curriculum of what was in the textbooks.
Personally, I believe strongly in assigning students practical or authentic assignments that they can put their heart and soul into, or something that motivates them. And I think that's a really great academic tool, and I think Mr. Diaz did a good job including that in his society and in his classroom. However, I think it's really important that we preserve well-roundedness in our students. As a prospective teacher, and from my own personal background, I learned the most through my core classes along with my authentic classes. So if I were to go to college and just do teacher classes, that would be awesome because I'm really interested in teaching and the foundations of it. However, I feel like I wouldn't be as well-rounded as a learner as I could have been with all of the subjects. In the case study, I think Mr. Diaz did a good job at helping students find what they're passionate about and use that knowledge to benefit themselves. However, I think that Mr. Diaz could also use these kind of skills and passions in core classes, such as using practical skills in math and in English too. After thinking about this hands-on example, we decided to explore a couple more overarching questions that would help us think more about this case study and how it can affect ethical and societal issues. Our first question focused on the differences between societal and individual good. We didn't think that this was an ethical issue, for Mr. Diaz never forced students to participate academically in this way. Also, because the school responded positively to Mr. Diaz's change, the neighborhood was definitely impacted in a good way. However, I do think there is conflict between the changes which impacted the individual and the changes which impacted the community. It was obvious that leading a more practical, hands-on curriculum benefited society. However, I do think individuals lost some of their home-based knowledge that is so crucial to post-secondary education. I agree that practical skills are useful and engaging, but one of the main problems with this approach is the lack of universal, concrete skills being learned.
So a question for our case study was, are the school's primary obligations to society or to the individual? What is the nature of these obligations? And at first, when I saw this, I was thinking that the school was trying to be innovative and not too traditional, but when I took a step back, I realized that the school was actually being too traditional. When my grandparents were younger and they went to high school, they were usually taught to go to school and then straight to the workforce and not to college. However, today we're taught to go to high school and then to college. I personally think that Mr. Diaz was trying really hard in order to fit the school into the community. However, the best interests of the students were not being kept in mind.
This case study was a little bit tricky for us because we thought that a lot of what Mr. Diaz was doing was good, but we also wanted to know how this could be resolved to be an even better approach to teaching students and furthering education for these students.
Mr. Diaz did excellent work in using the local community to turn the school around. However, just like all other positive efforts in education, there were imperfections in his solution. These lied in the fact that highly selective universities did not see that students had completed the academic curriculum deemed necessary for college preparation. Once a more positive environment was created within the high school, Mr. Diaz was in a much better position to look beyond the local community and bring the academic experiences that universities expect to see. These experiences may include AP courses or advanced level mathematics. Although changes that look beyond the local community will not benefit the students of Nestor High who are graduating, it is important that these students realize that rejection from highly selective universities is no reason to give up on their goals of furthering their education or to negate the progress they have made in high school. These students should be reminded that they have options and that attending a public or less selective university does not mean they have to settle with a lower quality education. The university experience will still challenge them to think in new ways and will provide them with opportunities to be proactive in their futures.
As our presentation comes to a close, what do you guys think? Do you think that Mr. Diaz did, in fact, do good for his society and for his school? Or do you think he overdid it with trying to compensate too much for practical skills and work study opportunities? Let us know in the discussion board below, and then we can even further this conversation. Thank you so much for listening, and enjoy the rest of your day.